Hey guys, what's going on? I'm back with another video. I gotta go on a rant about this thing. I mean, I know there's a lot of people going on rants about this, but the FCC voted yesterday to kill net neutrality. I gotta go on a rant about this because there's a lot of things people are saying about this, but there's a lot of things people aren't saying about this, and that's really there's a lot of hidden things in here. That's really the issue. So what I did is I went full out grade under A style and just kind of slapped this together, just a few pictures here to kind of make my point. So obviously, if you watch YouTube or you do anything, kind of like I do, this is this is not good. So obviously, if unless you live under a rock, at this point. So net neutrality is basically the idea that your internet company has to treat all your traffic the same, so they can't try to charge more to go on one website than another website, or really in the end charge the website or charge you. Just try to have control over, or at least try to charge more based upon what you're using on the internet, instead of just letting you use the internet in general. So the FCC voted to kill this thing, 3-2. Everybody's pissy about, really not angry. People aren't angry enough about this. And the reason for that, which is kind of why I made this video, is nobody's really going that far to do anything about it, because it'll cost, nobody's going to boycott not having it, because then they got to close their website and then they lose money. You know what I mean? It's so people are kind of stuck going along with it. And a lot of people are saying, well, this isn't good because, for the obvious reasons, because then they're going to want you to pay more money to use certain things. I mean, yeah, that is a problem, but there's really some evil stuff going on here when you really think about it. So just so you know, I'm not some, person, running my, well, I am a person running my mouth. Who am I kidding? But, just in terms of, I went to, the business school, the law, just all the hardest to get into places. I probably wasted too much time doing all the school. But I know what I'm talking about with some of the stuff at least. Just as far as the business and law aspects of this go, I kind of have a clue. Not that other people don't. Just there's some things that people are missing with this that I wanted to kind of point out, because it's got me all up in arms. So in 2017, when you're up in arms about something, instead of trying to fix it, you just go online and start yapping. That's pretty much kind of the code of conduct these days. So why not? All right, so this is really what I want to point out with this thing. So and like I said, grade under A style. Make sure I can try like a British accent. I don't know if that'll sell it home more. These cheeky bastards. That was terrible. But so these companies here, Verizon, Comcast, and AT&T. There's some other bad players as far as this net neutrality thing goes, but these three, I'm the most leery of Comcast, because they're really something. We'll get into it here. But these three companies here are all on the kill the net neutrality bandwagon. Obviously, because these are internet service providers. These are companies that would love to be able to charge you more to use certain things. But the thing is, though, is nobody's really said why. Everyone says, oh, they're gonna charge more. And I think Verizon did a video with their general counsel saying how they're not gonna screw everybody. I think Comcast also had a statement how they're not gonna try to screw everybody, which, first of all, don't believe that for 2 seconds. You know why? Because they wouldn't have been trying to get rid of this for years and spend money lobbying and doing all this work to try to get rid of it if they really didn't care. That's completely bogus. But the reason that they're doing this, and at least in my opinion, or that these companies want to get rid of net neutrality, it's not necessarily because they want you to go on your phone that says, oh, you got to pay $10, to do this. That would just ruin the service, right? That wouldn't really work. So that I don't believe that's what's going on. What's going on is actually a lot darker than that, in my opinion. So these companies here, and there's other ones, but Verizon, who I believe sued the government to try to get it. Comcast, who, if you don't already know, if you have Comcast, what Comcast does, among 50 other things, if you have Comcast for internet, the router they give you as of the last 2 years and change is actually a public hotspot. So you use it for your internet, but it also doubles as a public hotspot so that other people with Comcast can get on your internet for free. And there's a million things, their TV, their HD TV, the picture's all compressed. It's ugly because they can fit more people on their network that way without really having to upgrade their infrastructure, so it's all super compressed to try to fit more channels over one line. They own NBC, Universal, and which is obviously devolves into NBC News, NBC Sport. Like it's a massive conglomerate. Same thing with AT&T, owns DirecTV. I think they were trying to buy Charter once, but I don't think it happened. They've tried to buy T-Mobile like 40 times, and it kept getting shot down by the government. Verizon just buys everybody. They buy, they just had a $500 million deal with the NFL. These are not only internet companies, these are media conglomerates. And so when you talk about net neutrality, the whole thing to understand, it's really not about the net. It's not really about the internet. It's about media. Because in the last however many years, these companies have gone crazy acquiring media. Because people don't just go on the internet to, go on friggin' AIM chat like it's, 20 years ago. No. Everybody goes on to watch YouTube, Hulu, Netflix, videos, Twitter, movies, other things. It's all about media. The internet's all about media. So we'll just keep going here. The reason why we're seeing this is because these three companies here, really AT&T and Verizon, are the two largest wireless providers in the U.S., and they're pretty much in lockstep with everything. Their plans almost cost the same. If one goes up, the other one raises theirs. One drops their price, the other one drops theirs. Which is why around, really, I guess in 2010 in the case of AT&T and 2011 in the case of Verizon, they got rid of unlimited data. Okay? And the reason they did that is they said, look, before when people had like non-smartphones, people don't really use that much data because it's slow. It's like not even 3G. You can't really do a whole lot on it. But once people have an iPhone or any smartphone, an Android, whatever, and really start doing stuff on their phone using a lot of data, they thought, well, if we're giving this unlimited data, we have this network, we want to be able to charge like by the gigabyte. We want to, every time you use it, we want it to be, cash flow positive. We don't want to just have you pay this bit every month and use how much you want, right? Which is why, AT&T in 2010 and then Verizon in 2011, they get rid of unlimited data. The only reason it came back, and AT&T brought it back in 2016. If you have, so they got rid of it for 5 years. If you got DirecTV, and then earlier this year they just brought it back completely. Verizon brought it back earlier this year, and the only reason they did that and tried to be nice is because of these two companies right here. So these two companies, T-Mobile and Sprint, are the kind of like the little brother companies as far as a telecom goes in the U.S. Now, the only way they can compete, because I've had both of these companies and their service is not as good as the other two companies. I mean, it's actually better now, especially with T-Mobile. But, they don't have as good service, not, as good infrastructure. And so they can't really compete on, we've got the biggest network, we've got the fastest space, because that's not the case. So instead, they have to compete on price. So like T-Mobile is notorious. They give you, all this money for your phone, cheap rate, unlimited everything, free Netflix, free all this stuff. You see the commercials. They give everything away for free because that's how they compete is by being cheaper. So what starts to happen is, in Sprint, kind of the same story. What starts to happen is, and I think Sprint's CEO, I don't think he's the CEO anymore, said he's never getting rid of unlimited data or something like that at the time when these two companies here, Verizon and AT&T, were doing that. And by the way, just to throw Comcast in there, Comcast has a data limit. So if you have, like most internet companies, like at your house, you use however much internet you want. It's not like a cap. Comcast has a cap. In a lot of cases, they don't actually enforce it, but they do, just because they're trying to do the same freaking thing because they're terrible. But these two companies here start pulling a lot of customers away from Verizon and AT&T because they say, hey, look, you get a free phone. They pay you to get out of your contract. You get free Netflix. You get free this. You get free that. You get, So they start drawing a lot of customers away. And so what starts to happen is Verizon and AT&T have to compete. So, one thing turns into another. AT&T buys, they buy DirecTV to have more control over media. And the reason for that is because more people are watching things on their phone. So if we go on DirecTV, your data and your TV, we can have you watching TV using like the DirecTV app on your phone, data free. So it makes a lot of sense to lure people in because they're trying to fight back against these two companies. So the only reason unlimited data came back was because they had to compete with T-Mobile and Sprint. And the other thing, it's not just that. As phones get bigger and then videos get higher quality, people use way more data. So it stops being practical to have like a cap, because then that cap's not enough, and the next year it's not enough. So bring back unlimited. But then what happens is, these two companies here, and there's a bunch of other ones, Netflix and Hulu, people watch a lot of videos on their phone. And so what happens is videos use up a lot of bandwidth, but that's really like the majority of what people are starting to do on their phone. So if you think about like revenue centers for these companies, in the case of Verizon, AT&T, like you used to have to pay for texts, like you'd get so many texts a month and so many phone call minutes a month and so much data a month. But what starts to happen is, like for instance, if you have an iPhone, when you text and somebody else has an iPhone, you don't text. You're actually using iMessage, which is why it's a blue bubble. That's actually data. That's not a text. So Verizon and AT&T are not making any money when you text off the texts. People call less because they're using iMessage, or they go on FaceTime, or they use like FaceTime audio. I mean, sometimes you do call. But with the advent of so many other ways to communicate, like the amount of times people spent like actually talking on the phone went down. So now the majority of the traffic of the throughput is data. It's not phone calls and it's not SMS texts. It's data, and it's also people using these two things, right? And so they have to figure out, all right, well, let's start charging per the gigabyte, so they get rid of unlimited data. Now unlimited data comes back, in 2016, and I guess for Verizon earlier this year, Sprint and T-Mobile really never got rid of it, but they're kind of, they're kind of the bench players, if you catch my drift. So what you see start to happen is there's not just Netflix and Hulu. Like there's a lot of other, let's just say like illegitimate ways that people watch video, like the movie box or like YouTube, or like looking up like bootleg movies online, or not that that's really a lot of traffic, or, you get people, doing like pirating, like torrents and stuff. So Comcast, you got all the, and it's, they say like, oh, it's harming our network, it's using all this traffic, which is complete BS. It's not. It's such a small fraction of users. It's not really bogging anything down. It's just that what starts to happen is, if we have to treat everybody's web traffic the same way, well, if we can't get rid of unlimited data because we have to have it back now to compete and to be realistic, and we can't charge more for one thing than another thing, and people aren't really spending money on text and phone calls the way that they were, how is it that, we're going to put the screws to everybody again? And in the case of Comcast, on the other hand, they have almost the same problem, just in a slightly different way. Comcast's problem, and really, I guess, Verizon with their Fios business, really anybody that, does TV and internet and stuff like that, their problem starts to become, well, less people are paying for TV because more people are using this stuff, right? So now, and people don't really have home phones as much anymore. It's all internet. It's all data, right? So you don't have less people paying for phone service, and less people paying for cable TV. It's all data. So really, all three of these companies now, where Verizon used to be a phone company, AT&T was a phone company, and Comcast was a cable TV company, now they're all just internet companies now. Because everything is delivered that way for the most part. That's how people communicate. So when you're not using cable TV and you're using, I use cable TV because I really don't like either of these things, Netflix or Hulu. But that's just me. So they have to figure out, well then how is it we're going to we still want the money for that. Like they don't want to adapt their business. They just want to figure out a way to lean on somebody to kind of get the money for this stuff. So that's why you saw this effort to get rid of net neutrality, is because they need to target these two things. And that's really, Comcast, but I guess it's also Verizon, AT&T. Their thing is also less people using text, less people talking on the phone. It's just all data. How do we peel back the onion on what people are using their data for? Like if the onion is the data, the layers of the onion are the Netflix, the Hulu, like what people are using the data for. Because we want to be able to charge, to tax those specific things. So like Netflix, Hulu, stuff like that. Well, that's kind of supplanting cable TV revenue, or iMessage is SMS text revenue, or Skype, FaceTime, Hangouts, all that stuff is phone revenue. It's like they want to be able to basically recreate the same profit structure from before. Not exactly the same, but make up for losses in other areas by putting the screws to people in these areas. And again, this is kind of what I think, but also what what other people say. But some of this is just kind of my 2 cents here on this. So then this leads into my next point here. My next point, if you ever studied economics, oh my god, economics is got bad memories from that. Good God, back then. If you studied economics, you're gonna know what this term means: economy of scale, a proportionate saving in costs gained by an increased level of production. So basically, what that means is if you and I wanted to go start a telephone company, it would cost a fortune and it would take forever and we'd never figure it out and you wouldn't be able to do it. Right? Just say even a small, just in your neighborhood, you want to start your own internet service. It would be really hard. You got to buy a bunch of routers and buy. But if Comcast wants to do that, it's very cheap. They just send out a truck because they got a million of them. A guy runs the line on the pole. They already got the ladder. They already got the wire. They just do it. Because the scale of Comcast is so much larger than just you and I on an individual basis that it's actually it's much less expensive for them to do that. They can afford to roll with the punches like that. So what starts to happen is if you go back to these two, if they get rid of net neutrality and now these internet companies are free to charge more for one service over another, they can say, hey, Netflix and Hulu, if you want your connection to people to be able to watch your stuff, with the good speed, you're going to have to pay us. And they'll pay. Netflix and Hulu, they got the money. They don't want to, but they're going to have to pay. Otherwise, people aren't going to be able to use their service and they're going to lose customers. They're not going to want to. It's basically it's a shakedown. It's a street tax, is what it is. Now, this is kind of where I differ from other people. Other people think that, the internet companies all of a sudden are going to say, by the way, I think, in my opinion, it's going to get put back. Just wait a year and everybody keeps going at each other. It'll, everyone gets fired and somebody new and it'll go back eventually. So settle down. But for right now, internet company, people are saying they're going to, make you pay for packages to use different things. That's not going to happen because people use the internet for so many different things. It just wouldn't. It wouldn't work because you can't whitelist this website and try to you can't try to decide on every single site or domain what it just doesn't really work, and people would hate that. I mean, that would be so thinly veiled if all of a sudden your screen pops up, because I see so many of these pictures on social media and stuff where it's somebody did a Photoshop, you go on Google, and instead of screen pops up and says, oh, this isn't included, you have to pay separate for that. I don't think that would ever work because it would just ruin the service. But instead what they can do is charge companies like these two to have a better speed to use the service, right? And if you look at Comcast's statement about net neutrality, which I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it did say something about, we're not going to interfere with, I believe the word was lawful content. So if you think about that, what they're saying is, no, I don't think there's too many people pirating things or using illicit ways to watch stuff. But what that enables them to do is slow down everything that's not, Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, just go down the list, all those different streaming situations, all of them, right? Those are all, they can probably shake companies down into paying to get in the fast lane, whatever you want to call it. But if they slow down everybody else, the for instance, the Movie Box app and kind of bootleg websites and things people use to watch stuff for free, or different websites, or really anybody, because Hulu's legitimate, Netflix is legitimate, YouTube's legitimate, Google Play's legitimate, all of them, Crackle, legitimate, obviously. Their own freaking apps like Verizon On Demand, AT&T's DirecTV, and Comcast On Demand, they have their own, those are legitimate because it's their own thing. They need to get away for you to go away from using other services to watch your stuff and use either theirs or these companies that paid them to be fast. And then they can slow down everybody else, because when you think about it, these are legitimate ways to watch things. These are legitimate ways to watch things. Crackle, Google Play, iTunes. That's all legitimate. But then everything else that's kind of in that gray area where it's maybe it's kind of bootleg, or maybe it's, or if it's not one of these, it gives them this free reign to slow it all down, to make you have to use their service or these, because these people paid to have theirs be, an appropriate speed. Now, again, this is my speculation, but this is the way I think it's going to work out, if it ever even happens, because I'm not really that confident about it, or afraid, really. It's, it's whatever. But you see what I'm saying? So, like, when they say, well, we're not going to block anything legitimate, well, if they make it such that only their services and their services are the legitimate ones and block everything else, it forces you into use AT&T's, DirecTV, Verizon's Fios app or Comcast's app to watch things, or use their service to watch things, or YouTube or something. Basically, whoever pays their shakedown or however they want to make that work. And that accounts for less revenue in cable TV and other areas and things like that. But net neutrality, just to understand how these companies work, how awful they are. And when I say economy of scale, again, like, that's because these companies are large enough to be able to pay the shakedown, to be able to pay to have their stuff still work, to be in that fast lane. And again, this is just speculation. This might never even happen. But other places, like other, little apps, or some video somebody sent you, or anything that's not somebody that was large enough to pay to be in the fast lane, they can slow down, which discourages you from using other things other than this or that or YouTube or whoever, right? Because these companies are large enough to pay to be in the fast lane, whereas other people are not, and so it really just squishes everybody in it, and it kind of redirects that, not only, cash flow, but that control mechanism to these companies to be the arbiters of what and how fast and how much you're going to be able to access things online, that's kind of scary. This is kind of a separate thing here, just to let you know how awful these companies are. This is a map. Now, if you notice something about this map, there aren't any red areas, or there's just like a few. There's like literally like a few dots. But for the most part, there aren't any red areas where there were blue areas. And so if you look on the left here, red is an area where Time Warner Cable, who I believe I think they might have been bought by Charter at this point, but it's the same service addresses. I mean, the states aren't moving around. The red areas are that company, and the blue areas are Comcast. So if you notice, for most of this map, there's no red where there's blue. You know why? Because they don't want to compete with each other. That's why. Because if in New York, if you can only get Charter, and in Philly, you can only get Comcast, they can do whatever they want, charge however much they want, be however slow that they want, do whatever they want, and there's really nothing you can do about it because you only have one option. So, look at Ohio. Look at the western border of Ohio where it meets Illinois. Do you see how the Comcast just stops and the Time Warner stops and start? Like, see how straight down the line, right? It's almost like it's not almost. It's like an old school. It's gang territories is really what it is. Because they don't want to compete, because they want to screw everybody. So, I mean, anyways, then that's been going on that way forever. This map's actually a few years old. It's probably even worse now. Who knows? All right, well, that's what I had to say. This is just my 2 cents. I had to get that out there. Because a lot of people say, oh, well, you're going to have to pay more to use certain things. But there's a lot more to this than just that. And so I don't know. I kind of want to blow off some steam. This is really just me blowing off steam. That's what I wanted to throw at you there. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for this one. Hope you enjoyed this one. Other than that, until next time, that'll do it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching.